Welcome to this year's Black History Month presentation. Now would you please stand and join Ms. Makovsky's grade 7 class for the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, to pledge your love in all of us command. Cantum pras et porte leter, Dios et porte l'actua, Tony Suarez to Nicolay, de Trudrios ex-one. God keep our land, glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
O God, come to my assistance. Please to help me. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. This morning, I would like to pray a prayer for inclusiveness and forgiveness. Acts 17, verse 26 to 27. Heavenly God, from Adam you made every nation of mankind to live on all the earth. You did this because you are God of no partiality, and you do not regret a person's nationality, but desire that we seek you so that we may be saved. We all stem from one man, Adam. Therefore, you do not see us as different races. You see us as one, the human race. I pray that I too look at people the same way you do. Help me to show your love. Amen.
Good morning, VC. Morning. This year, Villanova College celebrates Black History Month with the theme Black History, Canadian History, My History. During Black History Month, Canadians celebrate the many achievements and contributions of Black Canadians, who throughout history have done so much to make Canada the culturally diverse, compassionate, and prosperous nation that it is today. People of African descent have been a part of shaping Canada's heritage and identity since the arrival of Mathieu de Costa, a navigator and an interpreter whose presence in Canada dates back to the early 1600s. The role of Blacks in Canada has not always been viewed as a key feature in Canada's historic landscape. There is little mention of the Black loyalists who came here after the American Revolution and settled in the Maritimes, or the many sacrifices made in wartime by Black Canadian soldiers as far back as the War of 1812. Few Canadians are aware of the fact that African people were once enslaved in the territory that is now Canada, or of those who fought enslavement to help lay the foundation of Canada's diverse and inclusive society. Black History Month is a time to learn more about these Canadian stories and the many other important contributions of Black Canadians to the settlement, growth, and development of Canada. It is also a time to recognize the diversity of Black communities across Canada and their importance to the history of our country. The commemoration of Black history dates back to 1926 in the United States. This was done to honor the accomplishment of African Americans and to heighten awareness of Black history. Celebrations of Black history began in Canada shortly thereafter, and in 1976, Black History Week became Black History Month, and we are currently in the middle of the International Decade for People of African Descent. In December of 1995, the House of Commons officially recognized February as Black History Month in Canada, following a motion introduced by the first Black Canadian woman elected to Parliament, the Honourable Jean Augustine. The motion was carried unanimously by the House of Commons. Today, we will hear from 3 young black men about their history. Dr. Kirk and I asked them to come to the podium today to allow them to speak their mind about their experiences and perspectives as young black men. But before I do this, I would like to speak to you about a friend of mine who is part of my history. His name is Dwayne Riggs Martin. I first met Dwayne at my first part-time job at the age of 16 at St. Hubert's Barbecue in Scarborough. At this time, Scarborough was the center of many conflicts between blacks and whites. I saw and experienced this violence firsthand, and there seemed to be little hope at understanding and forgiveness. It was a scary time in Scarborough, and as I began my job at St. Hubert's, Dwayne looked at me with skepticism and suspicion. But slowly, over time, we started to talk to each other. As we worked long hours together over a few years, we became good friends. After we finished work together, however, we went our separate ways. It was unspoken between us that it wouldn't be a good idea for us to hang out in public. Then one day, Dwayne did something that I did not expect. He invited me over to have dinner at his home with his family. And on this evening, after having a wonderful Jamaican dinner and laughing with his parents at the dinner table, 6 of Dwayne's family members and close friends arrived for the evening. Dwayne didn't tell me that he had invited them over. He did this so that they could all meet me. To make a long story shorter, I became friends with Dwayne's friends, and over time I started to hang out with them in public and meet their families. We became trendsetters, and people took notice of the strange sight of me hanging out with a group of young black men. Over time, I would come home from school, and Dwayne would be sitting with my parents on the balcony waiting for me. He would be embarrassed that I am speaking about him today. Unfortunately, there are only a few photos of him, but I have many happy memories. When he died of a rare bone cancer at the age of 24, I still hadn't realized what he had done for me in my life. He allowed me into his world and was courageous at a time when it wasn't cool for blacks and whites to be seen hanging out with each other. He took a chance on me, and because of this, his history became a part of my history. I'm a better man for having known and shared and learned from him about what it means to be black. I learned firsthand of the struggles he experienced because of the darkness of his skin. I am forever grateful to my brother, and I pray that he is resting in peace in God's care. I look forward when we will laugh together again. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please give a warm welcome to our first student speaker, Mr. Connor Walker.
Hello, I'm Connor, as most may know, and today I'm here to celebrate Black History Month. Black history does not only include the people who are here to speak with me, but everyone gathered in the Great Hall. To me, Black history is a reflection of where we came from to where we are now today. This month is a form of recognition to those who may have felt oppressed. It is a form of appreciation for those heroes who have made it possible for me to be here today, and it is a specialized month to honor them for paving the way. It is a display of strength, hard work, and dedication that has now made the acceptance of people of color a normality. It is taking something bad and saving it for the good. Black history means to be grateful for all the pain and suffering that some of our ancestors had to deal with. Our past struggles with society have now been embraced and formed into something that will benefit the generations following and that are still to come. Black History Month isn't just for black people, but for all people who may have struggled and felt powerless. It is history for everyone, even though it is most commonly associated with and celebrated by black people. It is a chance to harmonize with the fact that we are all very fortunate to walk in the shoes we do today. It is both a sense of pride and culture that gives you the ability to be proud of where you came from and display the appreciation we have. It celebrates the achievements of our ancestors, and it shows that we came a long way to overcome our obstacles. It also shows how united we truly are. It is a legacy and a story that will never be forgotten. It is a time when you can express your fears, and it is an example that shows when you face an obstacle, you need to pick yourself up, regain your strength, and overcome what may be halting you to progress and grow. A challenge I personally had to face was to find my own personal identity. For most of my childhood, it was just my mom, my brother, and myself. Being mixed and being most familiar with my mom's side, who is most prominently white, I was unfamiliar with my own roots on my father's side. I guess I had an identity crisis since almost all of my extended family was white. In my eyes, I always felt like I was that different cousin because of the color of my skin, even though that wasn't the way it was. As a young kid, this had me have this warped view that maybe being black was a disadvantage. As I got older and more knowledgeable, I swiftly came to realize that I wasn't different and that I am who I am. I figured out what it meant to be black and that it was an honor. At this point, my self-diagnosed identity crisis was now fading, and I also realized that I shouldn't think of myself as the different one. I realized that maybe even by the color of my skin I looked different, but I wasn't different. I realized that family is family. Black History Month is a chance to celebrate the low times and turn them into something that can educate all people and develop a feeling of respect and value for the life we live today. The past is no longer something to mourn about, and as Maya Angelou said, if you don't know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going to go. Thank you.
Good morning, Villanova. My name is Duncan Stewart, and I have been asked to speak to you today about Canadian Black history and my experiences as a person of color. Thinking about what to say, I realized that I have a unique perspective on representing both sides of Black history. To those of you who don't know me, I have a mixed heritage. On my father's side, I come from an Irish and English background. My great-grandparents immigrated to Canada in the late 1920s, a few years before Canada became an independent country through the Statute of Westminster. On my mother's side, I am of Jamaican ancestry. My mother and her family moved to Canada in 1979, shortly after Trudeau Sr. entrenched the policy of multiculturalism and Canada's identity. When I look at how I relate to Black history in Canada, I can identify with both the oppressor and the oppressed. From my English and Irish roots, I am led to be proud of Canada for being a lot more progressive on Black rights much earlier than the United States. The first Black person thought to have stepped foot in Canada's soil was Mathieu da Costa, a free man who was hired by Europeans to act as a translator. This was the beginning of Black history in Canada. Even though for the next 200 years, colonial Canada was a slave-owning nation, during the American Revolution, Canada became a safe haven for Blacks escaping slavery in the United States. Canada's reputation as a safe haven grew substantially during the War of 1812. Between 1815 and 1865, tens of thousands of African Americans sought refuge in Upper and Lower Canada via the legendary Underground Railroad. George Brown, who founded the Toronto Globe, better known as the Globe and Mail, used his platform to advocate for the disadvantaged state of Blacks in North America and attack the issue of segregation. The first Canadian naval recipient of the Victoria Cross was actually a Black Canadian, William Hall, who was awarded the prestigious military honor in 1857. Ontario was the first province in Canada to pass the Racial Discrimination Act of 1944, 20 years before Martin Luther King Jr. led the Selma to Montgomery March to demand racial equality. We can find dozens of other examples of Canada's progressive state on civil rights, but to me, nothing shows Canada's appreciation for Black culture like the Caravana Festival. On the other hand, while looking at Canadian history from a Black perspective, I can't help but feel angry and frustrated by the other examples of Canada's civil rights record. While Canada's government was offering refuge to American slaves, the people of Canada welcomed them with race riots, like the Birchtown Riot in Nova Scotia in 1784, or like the law prohibiting Negro dances and frolics in the town of Shelburne, Nova Scotia, or like the exodus of Black loyalists, in which 1,200 Blacks were forced to leave Halifax, realizing that they would never find true freedom and equality in the face of widespread discrimination. Not much has changed since the late 1700s. There are cases as recently as 1964, where Halifax demolished a poor Black neighborhood known as Africville without notifying the residents, and the community was forced to flee with whatever they could carry. In 2018, the Ontario Human Rights Commission found that Black residents in Toronto are 20 times more likely to be shot by police than white residents. In the last 10 years, while Black residents make up less than 10% of the city's population, they accounted for 61% of cases where police used force that resulted in death and 70% of police shootings that resulted in death. It is not surprising that as a person of both white and Black heritage, I am conflicted about the ongoing issue of race in Canada. I see that Canada has embraced people of color, but is yet to fully eradicate racism and discrimination. During Black History Month, we get a unique chance to engage in dialogue between people of color and the community. The only way to move forward on this issue of racism is to hear both sides and understand their perspective, and overcome our biases and promote unity in our communities, and hopefully the world. Thank you.
Good morning, staff, students, and all others who took the time to come to our Black History Assembly today. My name is Akanta Assalam, and I'm 17 years old in my 6th year here at Villanova. When I was told that I was going to be speaking at this assembly, I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about. I knew that I didn't want my speech to be about statistics. I'm not gonna talk about how unarmed Black men are twice as likely to be killed in a police brutality incident as a white male. I'm not gonna mention how 1 out of 3 people killed in a police brutality incident any given year is Black. And I'm not even going to talk about how 69% of police brutality cases involving a Black male had the suspect listed as non-violent, and the suspect was not confirmed. It's okay. I'm not gonna bore you with stats or achievements of Black people until your eyes glaze over and you start talking about if water is really wet or not in your head. This point of my speech and the point of the other 2 speeches today was to try and give you an insight into what it's like being Black in Canada. My story starts off a bit differently than the others, as I was not even born in Canada. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, to 2 Nigerian parents. 2 months after I was born, my family packed my stuff up and we moved back to Nigeria, where I spent the first 6 years of my life. I don't remember a lot about my time in Nigeria, but one thing I can remember very clearly is that I was a very emotional child. Remember that, you will come back later. When we arrived in Canada in 2009, I wasn't aware of how different life would be for me. It took a very long time for me to realize that I was different than the people around me. In fact, it took until my first day of grade 5 here at Villanova to realize that I wasn't like the other kids in my class. The day I realized that I was actually going to be judged on how I looked for the rest of my life was when one day in gym class, a student came up to me and told me that I should be good at basketball because I was Black. As soon as he said that, I realized that all the stories I'd seen on TV and in YouTube videos and on social media wasn't just some exaggeration made by a bitter old man. These were real parts of his life, and I knew that from that day that they would also be parts of my life as well. It seemed like every day the idea that I would be less like everyone else was proven wrong. It didn't come just from school, but from all parts of my life. I could go places where I didn't know anybody and still somehow be reminded that I looked nothing like the people around me. We could be here all day if I listed off every incident. I could tell you about the time a woman in Ohio tried to get my basketball team and I kicked out of a restaurant because she thought we were a gang. We were 12 years old at the time. Or we could talk about the time when I was 14 and one of my best friends came up to me and told me that I was classy, smart, and well-spoken. That seems like a compliment, except for the fact that he started off by saying, "You know, AK, you are the whitest Black person I know." Remember how I told you that I was a very emotional child? This is why I needed you to remember that part. Every day I was in a situation involving my race, I let my anger get the best of me, and I became confrontational and hostile. It took many years for me to learn that self-control and to be the bigger person when confronted with ignorance. But at the end of the day, ignorance isn't just an option for a Black person living in Canada, it's a necessity. Finally, a major part of being Black in Canada is interacting with other Black people. Growing up, the only Black people I saw on a regular basis were the people in my family and the guys that I played basketball with. This meant that for most of my life, I was surrounded by people I didn't even look like. This was at its peak when I first came to Villanova. I was the only Black kid in my grade and one of only 2 Black students in the entire middle school of about 150 at the time. This meant that spending 8 hours a day with predominantly white students meant that when I was around other Black people my age or a little bit older than me, that I wasn't really seen as Black. There was something they saw in me that I didn't see in myself that made them not see me as Black enough. While I dealt with that, I also had to deal with the expectations of my classmates and even sometimes my teachers. It seemed like every day someone would do something to me that reminded me of the expectations that most people had for me. Such as the time when my dad came to pick me up from school and a girl in my class looked at me surprised wide-eyed and actually asked me, "You have a dad?" I have been asked every question imaginable. Am I from the hood? Is my dad still a part of my life? Do I rap? Do I play basketball? Do I eat fried chicken and drink Kool-Aid? It's okay, you guys can laugh. It's supposed to be a joke. Why is it that all of these things are traits that are associated with being Black? I know that there isn't an easy answer, but I want you all to think about why these are so. As Carlton Banks once said, being Black isn't something that I'm trying to do, it's who I am. Now I think it's time for me to stop trying to make you all feel bad and finally answer the question asked. What does it mean to be Black in Canada? Well, no offense to Dr. Kirk and Mr. Lambert, but it's a stupid question. Being Black in Canada is the same as being Black anywhere where you are the minority. Being Black means having to work twice as hard to shatter the low expectations that people have for you and to get the recognition that you truly deserve. It means always having to look impeccable when you go out because we know that we are being judged by our appearance before we can even open our mouths and utter a word. It means constantly checking the mirror before you go out because you don't want to appear ghetto, or having to answer stupid questions from strangers about the kind of person you are. It even means holding your tongue when someone who you considered a friend called you a nigger behind your back. But you can't do anything about it because you would be considered the villain. However, even though these are struggles that I'll have to deal with for the rest of my life, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. If there's one thing I want you all to remember from this mediocre speech, it's that nothing worth being proud of is easy. And God knows that I am proud of being Black. Thank you.
There's always been something jarring about Black History Month in the way that it's usually white teachers standing in front of mostly white audiences telling them what Black history is. And generally, it takes the flavor of a list of Black achievement facts. Reducing actual people to lists of facts is insulting to their lived experiences, which undoubtedly would be difficult to summarize in a jot of bullet points. It's for this reason that we've asked some of your peers to share their own stories. They haven't been edited or changed to fit some sort of agenda. They're real stories from real people with varied pasts. We wanted to avoid empty celebrations of achievements and allow Black voices to speak unimpeded. And so, having heard your peers speak about their stories, I hope that you understand a little bit more about Black history as Canadian history. I'd like to thank Connor Walker, Duncan Stewart, Akanta Assalam, Ms. Powell, and Ms. Redhead for their participation today, as well as Ms. Maikovsky's grade 7 class for their rendition of the national anthem. Please stand and join hands as Ms. Powell offers our closing prayer for today.
Une prière de Saint François d'Assise. Là où il y a de la haine, que je mets l'amour. Là où il y a l'offense, que je mets le pardon. Là où il y a la discorde, que je mets l'union. Là où il y a l'erreur, que je mets la vérité.
Thank you to Dr. Kirk and Mr. Lambert for putting everything together today, and to Ms. Redhead and Ms. Powell, and of course, once again, to Connor, Duncan, and AK for sharing your stories with us, your histories, and giving us a little bit of insight into your experience, and hopefully helping us to understand a little more, not only Black history, but Canadian history through your history. So thank you. Please let's show us our appreciation once again for these young men.
Ooh.